Hello, this is Professor Mike Labasi. This is for my CIS 2808 Introduction to Computer Forensics class, and this is welcome to Topic 1. This is a brand new series here. It'll be labeled version 2 since we changed over, and this is using the CHFI, the Computer Hacking and Forensics Investigator, EC Council content. So this is over Module 1, Computer Forensics in Today's World. So as seen, we can see here. So it's not too much here in demo or technical. This is really just about forensics in general. Again, I'm not going to read you the chapter, and I'm not going to go over all the slides. There's an extensive slide deck. Fantastic material. I want to highlight things that I think are important out of this. So we will start talking about that. So of course, right off the back here, of course, is understanding computer forensics itself. What is it? And yeah, we would think most of us know what it is. It's pretty straightforward. However, there's some things we need to make sure we extract from this, and that is this right here is we are able to, as forensics investigators, identify, gather. So there we go. Identify, gather, preserve, extract, interpret, document, and preserve evidence. So we can see this in sort of a process. And think of identify and gather as sort of the first process here, and we'll see where it's possible the background of the case and type of case might help you identify what you're looking for. Preserve is a huge one. You make sure we preserve the original evidence. This will be looked at later, but I'll just say this now. With any evidence, you typically never really touch the original evidence. So let's say it's a mobile device. You make a read-only copy or a read-only channel copy of the entire device of the evidence, and we use a way to hash that or show its value, and we take a copy of that, and then we use that to do our extraction. Hence, extract, interpret, and document. That is typically done from a copy, a forensics copy. So that's later in the course. It's not even in the chapter. It might be in there, but I just want to bring it up now. It is such an important concept. You never ever really use the original hard drive. Let's use hard drive for example, or thumb drive, or phone. You never actually dive in and start gathering evidence from that. You do it from a copy. Interpret, that could be a hard one. This is where it could be, well, I might interpret something different than you would. But in any case, interpret and document. Very important process is documenting. A lot of notes. Keep very sound notes. What you ran, what version of tool you ran, when you ran it, what was the results. Because when you go to present evidence, it could be possible later. The gap here could be a long time. If you're looking at something like the FBI lab in Cincinnati, for example, that could be 6 months, a year before the case actually gets to trial. And during that time, you may have done a dozen or even 50 or 100 more other cases. And so you need to go back and reflect about your investigation process, how you interpreted it, what you did, how you extracted it. But you need to present that as an expert witness. And of course, you can see you easily lose any of that in your memory of what you did. So those notes are going to be very important. So just think about that. This is the important part, is what we're doing here. And so what we're looking at also is using a forensic sound manner. And this is what this typically comes down to. This is, when and why we use computer evidence in forensics here. You're supporting the prosecutor of the perpetrator. You're really trying to do is to get the truth out. And it could be, before it even gets to trial, some of that information could be used to help determine who's innocent versus guilty. But really, you're looking for the truth. So, and understanding your computer line of attack might help you in the process of ID and gathering. Again, cybercrime is usually an illegal act involving a computer device and some systems applications. So, but understanding if it's an internal or insider attack versus an external attack. So this is something that's probably a little more unique to cybercrimes. And of course the digital evidence portion. And now we see this a lot, even with murder, murders, any type of actual physical crimes. Um, we see the divergence of both of these things here. What normally we would think is a cybercrime, and you think of a physical crime, used to think those used to be separate, right? A hacker, someone embezzled money, it's insider trading, whatever. It could be somebody, there's a list of these, and the chapter talks about some of these. Example, physical crime, somebody murdered their spouse. We see that for 48 hours, right? Primetime Live. A theft happened in a store. Well, this is really diverged a lot now. This is what you're going to see here. We got the cybercrime and physical crime. And if you watch, again, like my wife and I like to watch 48 Hours or Primetime Live, the physical crime, the perpetrator, Googled how to dispose of a body. Ding, 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 that's cyber there. Or the evidence of the phone location, text messages, emails, this stuff. So there's a huge overlap now of this. So just keep that in mind, and it's going to be important we look at another concept coming up here, real important concept here. When it comes to line of attack, though, external attack, external attack, that's going to help you maybe figure out where to start looking and how to approach the crime. And this is going to be later on when we look at preparing as a cyber investigator. So, chapter goes into some other stuff here. Meticulous collection of clues and what it is. But this is a good one right here. It's important is to figure out that not everything you're doing here is criminal. So, I know we think CSI, whatever, criminal activity. That's definitely the first thing that comes to mind. Something with working with authorities. However, there could be civil. Some of the stuff could be a civil crime. In any case, the evidence should be handled the same, but also administrative. This could be used for human resources to prove that someone said something incorrect. It could be as simple as using internal systems to host illegal software and things like that. So things that don't really move into the civil or criminal side of the house, but do work internally. And so keep that in mind. Civil, criminal, administrative, and of course it could be a little bit of both, but all evidence should be handled the same, whether it's either three of those things there. Now, an important concept talked about before, we talked about insider-outsider attack, and of course introduction to digital evidence. The important thing we look at, what is the digital evidence itself? Any information, and not just data, information of appropriate value that's either stored or transmitted in digital form. That's an important concept. They're stored or transmitted. That should open up some ideas about where you might look for this. There's some other things on the slide, but another important concept here, though, is digital evidence is typically circumstantial and fragile in nature. This is really critical. I say fragile because we'll see how volatile it could be. And there's some called order of volatility, and we'll talk about that. But that's what it means by fragile in nature. There's times where you need to act fast to get certain evidence that is very volatile in nature. So, and with that in mind, think about insider, external, the type of crime, identifying the type of crime, and where we start gathering evidence. Before we start preserving it, we figure out what to gather where. Internal, external. There's a concept here called Locard's exchange principle. This actually comes from the physical side of the house, more of physical forensics. The idea is anyone leaving or entering a crime scene takes something with them, as well as leaves something behind. So, so the perpetrator, or even other investigators, first responders. And this, of course, will cause a lot of confusion and issues with the crime scene. But think of this in the term of digital. I really like the idea for digital here is, we have someone using their phone. It's a bad version of my phone. When they take the phone on a crime, you might think, well, here we have suspect, we have suspect A and we have accomplice B, right? A is texting B, messaging them. A is, you know, A is searching for stuff on Google, how to hide or how to counterfeit money. So we have the cloud involved here, cloud services. But also, as they take that with them, when the phone goes, let me see this. Here's supposed to be a cell phone tower. Excuse my bad drawing. But the phone itself will ping cell phone towers, GPS data, if they use maps, GPS. So there's a lot of things that when the suspect take our device, and we'll use phone, but this is probably the biggest one here, goes, it gathers, it leaves behind, traces, as well as gathers information when it gets information. So anything from a direct contact between A and B, suspect A and suspect B here, text messages, but also suspect A's use of Google search. We have DNS records, we have search records, and probably search history. So DNS records could be one, and that is actually off. That could be from, of course, our ISP. We have cloud providers that might have records as such. Could be backups into a cloud provider, like iCloud, for example. So there'll be multiple cloud providers here, not just one. And of course, when the device is in transit, it's going to leave behind traces of what cell phone tower just pinged, GPS data may have downloaded from maps. So you can see how this really is applicable in digital. I really like the idea of this because it helps you open your mind up to where you need to look for evidence, possibly. So that's the little cards exchange principle. I think we talked about it again, but it's introduced here in this chapter in Module 1 here. So very important stuff. So rules of evidence. Very important we look at rules of evidence. And here's the thing. There's a lot of things that comes to dealing with digital evidence. There are 5 basic rules here. Might be skipping over these here. Let's go to thumbnails. There you go. The 5 basic rules of evidence. I need to hide this. Very important. It's understandable. It's admissible. It's authentic, reliable, and complete. So I'm not going to read everything to you, but understand there's these 5 concepts. Probably the most important is admissible. It's not, of course, you have the rules of heresy. And of course, what you want is things that are admissible in court. Anytime you taint the evidence, you make it inadmissible. It's easy for the defense to strike it down, even if it's still authentic and it's reliable. This is just the user's search query. It's them typing in, showing them on their mobile device or their computer doing a search, because we did not understand. We didn't do the process correctly. We didn't go back and handle the process, right? We talked about the gathering, the preservation, documenting. We skipped something there. Maybe we didn't make a forensic copy, and we actually used the real evidence, and we tamper with it, and now it's not admissible. It is struck from court, and there's a bunch of rules for that. But understand this is an important aspect of this. So always keep this in mind. Understandable, of course. It needs to be clear, understandable, not just the judge, but the jury or anyone, the administrators, who you're giving the evidence to. And that is part of the process of presenting. If you try to present something that's too complex, it might not have the impact you think it is. It still could meet everything. It could be admissible, authentic, but it just can't be absorbed by a judge or jury. So that's an important rules there. And then with that, there's something called the best evidence rule. This is very important. Normally, you always have the original evidence. Evidence is always presented in court. You might see it. It's usually bagged and tagged, and it could be a photo that was taken, the original photo, original fingerprints taken, things like that. However, we have the rule of best evidence because of digital. Now again, you make a forensic copy of the person's suspect's cell phone. and you show through a process, and that's later in this course, that you're dealing with the exact copy, Francis copy. So here's an example of a best evidence rule. Log files that come from an ISP. So remember back before, look at that Lockhart's exchange principle there. Our suspect A has ISP or cloud service, has some sort of information in their log files. Now logs are huge. We're going to look at that later in the course. You don't actually go out and get the server and pull it and bring it in and put it into the courtroom and then show you. Yeah, so basically it's best evidence, saying this is the best evidence we can verify it is a copy that was given to us from the ISP or the cloud provider. And so there's a process in place to do this, and we're going to look at cloud in this course. Cloud's a huge one. This comes into play. So keep that in mind. This is called the best evidence rule. It's a very important concept you need to understand. I'm not going to go through these rules because, again, best evidence rule has to play into this. But there is any claim of error. Again, you need to show that the evidence itself is asserting the truth and securing its determination here. So there's rule 102 with purpose. There's a lot of rules here. Of course, we have rule 104, admissibility. So it must decide whether the witness or is qualified or expert witness. Again, we need to show relevancy of the evidence. This is where circumstantial could become into play, where if it's so circumstantial, it doesn't even apply to the case, or if it's evidence of possible other activity, doesn't apply to the case in principle. So, we're trying to show evidence of theft, and there might be evidence of hacking that doesn't really apply to the case. So yeah, it doesn't. You can't just bring in all evidence just to show this is a bad person. You show what's applied to the case. So again, everything should be cross-examining and awaiting credibility. So it's important. So again, a lot of evidence. We need to play within these rules. 104 being admissibility. And of course, we have 105, also limited admissibility here. And here's the rule is 801. So this is a big one here. Anything that is not admissible if proven otherwise. So again, you prove that there is something at stake here. It's been tampered with. So it could be stricken from, and here it talks about it being declared immaterial and stricken. So either not even brought into trial or stricken from evidence record. So that's 804 there. And then we have here about federal rules with the 1001 of definitions. Writing, photographs, and originals. This is what I talked about before. Writing an original must be recording itself. So again, duplicate. This is an important aspect right here. This is very critical because again, we're dealing with a forensics duplicate, a forensics copy of an actual device, hard drive. The best evidence rule showing it is an exact copy of the logs that was provided to us, certified by the provider, and then they have someone who can say that the process they use to extract those logs, it itself does not break any of the previous rules. So it's a lot of juggling here. So this is why it's really important to understand why the process of understanding admissible, authentication, reliable, and complete, as well as how we handle these things. Back to the basic rules. Anytime you break these rules, you have the chance of breaking 804 and have any evidence stricken from that. So chapter 2 goes into this. It's a very important concept here. And we have other rules, 1002, 1003, 1004, admissibility. Admissibility of duplicates is very important. A joining question is raised the authenticity. So again, we're going to look at that. I think coming next module, actually creating evidence or extracting evidence and how you handle evidence. So, so to deal with all this complexity, I'm not going to go any more deeper into the chapter here. We have working groups. For example, we have the scientific working group on digital evidence. There's working groups to help ensure standards are there, because if there's nothing out there, what would you consider a forensic standard? Like, what makes your process, forensically sound? So there's a lot with SWG. I think we have some links to those all through the course. We'll definitely investigate those. Hardware, software being used, how to maintain written copies. So there's a lot of processes that help establish a forensically sound process. There's other ones here, other associations to help with principles of digital evidence. There's Department of Justice has PDFs to help with this too. So, and the chapter wraps up, or the module, the chapter wraps up with these last things here: forensics readiness. I'm not going to go too much into this here. Look it over, though. It's important just to understand how to be ready, because if you need to have some readiness here, and this really, I think, comes to, it's no surprise. Yeah, a law enforcement, the FBI lab, they have procedures in place. They have tools that have been validated. They have processes and training, right? To that forensics technician or investigator using sound processes, going back to the previous concepts, that can be held up against witness statements, court, defense attorneys, looking over everything. You show soundness of evidence here. So that's important to have readiness. So you got to be ready for that. Includes things to reviewing your process, update training, reviewing tools, and validating tools also. And so there's ways to validate tools for the useness, and that's what that working group helps with, how to validate a tool you use to extract evidence from a log file, how you know it's valid, how you know it's not producing errors or anything inadmissible. So, but another part is forensic readiness. It's not just for the criminal side, it is incident response teams. Again, a big part of forensics is also working within a company and responding to being hacked. Who hacked us, how they try to get in, and so it could be that the the incident response plan in place doesn't really need to sort of preserve evidence. You still might preserve evidence, even up to a criminal, using the same things you use for criminal. You think, why would you do that, right? You need to figure out who hacked us and how we can make sure that we don't get hacked again. What if that hack came from inside our job? And what if we need to actually take that to the authorities? If we have tampered with that evidence in any way, we have now just sort of hurt our own case against, actual prosecution against an, insider attack, insider threat. So it's a balance. I've been on stuff where I've gotten copies of the logs. I didn't do any validation. All we want to know is, how do they try to hack us? Found out a certain web page, certain parameter. It was mitigated, however, we think we have a problem here. We need to go back and patch this middleware. Because the output, what was needed from our team or from a incident response team, is different from maybe from what's needed from a criminal response team. So an IR team for both computer and incident response team, how to identify who has breached us and how to mitigate it. That could be the main thing. That might override some of the stuff about how we handle evidence, but it should be documented in either case. This is where it's important to have a process in place, and it documents that as such. So, Jeff talks about this, the role of investigators. It has some really cool things about response flow, and I'm not going to go over any of this, things like that. So, there's a bunch of stuff here about that. Legal issues, very important here. Look at legal issues. But look at the summary here. I guess I can just delete that. But so again, it's very important that learn the methodologies in place to identify, gather, preserve, and extract, and interpret, and document, and present evidence. So understand what a legal act involving computer device and network. So that's sort of that low cards exchange principle is a great way to look at this. What was involved in this legal act? Is it a device, a network? It could be both. A system is an application. Does the application have their own cloud presence? And there's a bunch of stuff involved here. What if they're using a cloud service that's overseas, a different state? So this is all covered in the chapter with legal issues. There's a lot of issues here with this. And of course, you can imagine any kind of anything that deals with criminal acts, you need to have, of course, proper search and seizure warrants. Because there's the Fourth Amendment issues in place. So, and that's something that the chapter talks about. If not this chapter, I think the next one. That's the process. I think that's the next one. It goes into that too. When I talk about search and seizure. This is a little more baseline, but keep that in mind. You can imagine if you collect evidence that's not part of the search and seizure, the warrant, it's not going to be admissible. So think about digital evidence as very fragile in a way. It's also very volatile. So there's an order of volatility that talks about. And that's right there, volatility, nature of evidence. So how you handle a digital device and what you plan to collect from it will help you proceed to get the best evidence from that. So, and then all the legal rules, there's a bunch of legal rules in place from 102 to 1003 and beyond that probably. You don't have to become a law expert, but understand they're in place, and this is going to affect how you go about with your procedures and being readiness for digital evidence. So anyways, yeah, we're going to understand the laws of forensic investigation and other countries too. So yeah, a lot more complex now. So especially if you're dealing with anything overseas. So the chapter talks about that, and I'll leave it there. I don't want to go any more than that. But anyways, that is the module, module 1 from the CHFI, module 1. And again, I think the summary has the same thing I just talked about. So again, don't want to read you the textbook. That's for your job. So in any case, I just want to give you a highlight of what we're looking at here, and give you some idea about some of the important aspects that I think you should learn, understand from this chapter or module. So anyways, thank you for watching. Take care.